My notes, but the next speaker is going to be Donna Kramer. And Donna Kramer is, she is a registered nurse who works at WellStar. She's in charge of the Congregational Health Network, which we are a partner of. And she also has a master's in divinity. And she's going to speak about advanced directives and making some of these decisions in advance of what you may want to do in case you cannot speak for yourself. So I'm going to allow Donna some time, and that is what the booklet that we just handed and put on your table at the break, she will be addressing that.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to represent the healthcare providers, your doctors, your nurses, your hospitals. We've heard a lot tonight about making choices and making your choices known and communicating your wishes to your family and your loved ones. And that certainly extends to your healthcare providers. We have a purple and white book in the back, and this is just one page taken from it, so I know most of you can't see it, and it really doesn't matter because it's in the book. But what it says is that we want to respect your wishes, but we cannot honor your wishes if we don't know what they are. And so very briefly, I want to talk a little bit about the process of advanced care planning and then some of the forms and the terminology and the documents. And it truly is a process. I would assume that many of us have a pretty good idea of what we would like or what we wouldn't like. But for many others, we have not yet started to think about it, much less to talk about it with our loved ones and engage in a dialogue where they talk with us as well. And so it becomes an ongoing process of thinking about what are some of the common situations that we may encounter at the end of our life, to talk about those with our loved ones, maybe thinking about it some more, and then ending up with the documentation. As Mickey mentioned, there are multiple types of forms to use, and all of which are legal in the state of Georgia. She talks specifically about 5 wishes. That's a really good program, but we have what I think is a better one offered for you tonight, and this is called the Critical Conditions Planning Guide. This was developed in Georgia about 12 years ago as a grant where Georgia Health Decisions went throughout the state and convened forums and focus groups, folks just like all of us. And they asked people, how many of you have made your wishes known? And I think the 35% that Mickey was talking about is really pretty high. We don't see it quite that high in the hospital setting. And then the big question was, okay, for those of you who have not yet documented your wishes, what are some of the barriers? And I would imagine we can think of quite a few of those. Think about your own situations for those of you who have not yet written out your documents. And if we do it with honesty, then I think that tonight is a great first step. And I would like to ask that all of you look at someone in the room and make yourselves accountable to that person to have your documents completely written, communicated, so that you know that this will be your final gift to your loved ones, and their final gift to you will be in the honoring of your wishes. I want to spend a few moments talking about some definitions, because Mickey was talking about the financial pieces, the will, the durable power of attorney, and that terminology is very similar when we're talking about healthcare directives, but they actually are 2 separate and distinct processes. An advanced healthcare directive is just a set of instructions where you indicate your wishes for the type of medical care you would want to have sometime in the future when you cannot speak for yourself. Perhaps the most well-known type of advanced medical directive is the living will. For the most part, the living will states the type of medical treatment that you don't want. I've seen a lot of living wills over the 10 years that I've been doing this, and most of them say that if I am in a terminal condition with no hope of recovery, or if I am in a permanent state of unconsciousness, I do not want any life support treatment that will prolong my life but not give me any quality of life. And those 4 typical life-supporting treatments are, number 1, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR. Number 2, artificial ventilation or breathing machines. Number 3, artificial hydration. And number 4, artificial nutrition, which Father Tom spoke about. I want to make it clear, though, when we're talking about artificial ventilation, we are not talking about the use of oxygen with someone who is otherwise breathing on their own. Okay, as long as someone is breathing on their own, as long as someone is able to swallow, whether it's someone feeding them or them feeding themselves, that's not considered life support. That is just normal part of living. Okay? Another type of an advance directive is called a durable power of attorney for health care. And with the durable power of attorney, it complements the living will because by law, the healthcare providers cannot act on your wishes unless they have the permission of a representative. In Georgia, we call that representative a healthcare agent. You may have already heard the term healthcare advocate, healthcare proxy, healthcare surrogate. It means the same thing, where you name an individual whom you trust, who you've talked to about what you want or what you don't want, and empower them to make decisions on your behalf if you cannot. Now, your healthcare agent does not need to be related to you. It certainly can, but it doesn't have to be. There's only one person who cannot be your healthcare agent, and that is your healthcare provider, that physician who is writing the orders about your treatments. Cannot be your agent, but otherwise you can. I'm oftentimes asked, well, who's a good choice of an agent? My answer is, who will stand up for you and your wishes when you can no longer speak for yourself? Who is that person who, in the face of grief, in the face of conflict from other family and loved ones, who is that person who will say, no, we are going to do it this way because that's what your mama wants? Or we're going to do it this way because that's what daddy wants, and we are going to honor those wishes. So it can be a friend, it can be even an attorney, someone that you paid for that responsibility, but it can be anyone you want. What are some of the other directives? The one that we have in this book is the legal directive in Georgia. It is called the Georgia Advanced Directive for Healthcare, and it's located on page 29 of this workbook. Now, just because it says the Georgia Advanced Directive for Healthcare, remember I said previously that any form from any jurisdiction, as long as the provisions are legally executable in Georgia, is sufficient. So if you lived up in Pennsylvania and moved down here and you have not yet completed a Georgia directive, that Pennsylvania directive is just fine. Now, the question is, does the opposite happen? You have a Georgia directive, you are out in California, and you have a life-altering event. Will they honor your Georgia directive? And the answer is, practically speaking, yes, they will. Because, number one, the laws, although they are unique to each state, their provisions are widely similar. And so there's in practical terms, nothing in the Georgia directive that is going to be illegal in any other state. I think a more practical purpose is this. You know how you have a relationship with your care provider. Think about if you are somewhere, you are gravely ill, and those providers don't know you. Yes, they might be able to get your history from your provider here, but they've never had the opportunity to have a conversation with you. That's where this book comes in. I use the metaphor of this book being your voice. Whatever you want your health care providers to know about your wishes can go into this document and any of the other worksheets that we have. So the Georgia Directive for Healthcare is one of the most comprehensive documents, and we always in Georgia tend to look down on our state as perhaps not being in the forefront, and we really are when it comes to advanced directives. There's one additional document that I would like to mention before I just go very quickly over the planning guide, and that is what Father Tom referred to as allow natural death. In your advanced directive, you may say, I do not want to have CPR, I do not want to have artificial ventilation, I do not want to have artificial nutrition nor artificial hydration if I am terminally ill or in state of permanent unconsciousness. Although the advanced directive is a legal document, although it does express your wishes, it cannot be followed by healthcare personnel until a physician signs an order. So if you have an advanced directive that says, I don't want any life support, and you pass out at home and your family calls EMS, if your heart stops in the ambulance, they are going to provide CPR. That is the law, and that is their license. Now, there is the physician order that most people call commonly do not resuscitate, or DNR, and you've probably heard that term. As Father Tom said, at Wellstar we use allow natural death, and statewide you're going to begin this summer to hear a new terminology, and that is a POLST. That is P as in Peter, OLST. And it is an acronym for Physician's Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And what a POLST does is takes your advanced directives with your wishes. It is then signed by a physician, and it becomes an order, just like any other physician order for any treatment, surgery, or medication. A POLST oftentimes will say, allow natural death, but in and of itself, a POLST is not a synonym for DNR. It can say that I do want to be resuscitated, I do want all measures, I do want antibiotics, or any combination of those. What makes the POLST different and what is so exciting from a healthcare perspective is that when an individual leaves the hospital for another level of care, let's say that we have someone who is 90 years old, who has heart failure, who has been in and out of the hospital multiple times during the last 2 years. And in the past 6 months, those hospitalizations have become more and more frequent, lasting longer. That individual may say in a conversation with her doctor, you know, I think enough is enough. I realize that I have a terminal illness. I have no idea when God is going to choose to take me home, and I plan to live as long as I can. However, if something does happen to me and my heart does stop, or I do stop breathing, I really do not want to be resuscitated. I really want to allow the dignity of having a natural death. And so in the hospital setting, let's say the doctor writes that order, allow natural death. Well, what happens when the individual goes to an assisted living? The POLST will follow that person, so that in the assisted living environment, if something were to happen, let's say the person fell. Well, EMS comes. Well, maybe this individual broke her hip. Well, she'll still go to the hospital and get surgery for a broken hip, but then she goes back to subacute rehab, and the pulse follows her. We're still going to do everything we can to make her quality of life for whatever time she has left as fulfilled and as healthy as it can be. But she has made the decision that if her heart stops, if she stops breathing, if she's no longer able to take food or water by mouth, that she does not want artificial life support of any sort. So that's a real big advantage, especially for someone who is chronically ill, who is up in years and says, I've had enough of this transferring back and forth because it's not giving me a quality of life. They're no longer able to do anything to make me better. Very important. And I'll take questions later if you have questions on it. But I want to go through the 3 sections of this planning guide. The first section for the first 13 pages is what we call the conversation starter. And each of those first 13 pages has a topic, which is readily on the top of the page. The rest of the formatting for those first 13 pages is after the title, you see a little story. You'll see some discussion questions, really helpful if you are a little bit undecided about your course of action or your wishes concerning that, but invaluable when you are having a discussion with your family and your loved ones. The next section from page 16 to page 23, is what we call a workbook. We know that your decisions are based on your values, your faith traditions, and also what you perceive to be as quality of life. But the specifics may mean something a little different to each of us. And so in this workbook section, we have the ability to define what is quality of life. Does it mean that I have to be able to bathe and dress myself? If I can't do that, that's not quality of life. For a lot of people, they would say yes. What if I were to be paralyzed and unable to move, but I still had all of my mental faculties? Is that quality of life? Once again, for some people it would, for others it would not. What's important is what is quality of life for you, and how do you communicate that to your family and loved ones? And then on page 29 begins the actual document. So up until page 29, as you're going through this when you get home, I would encourage you to write in this book. Make your notes, ask your questions right there in the book, because it's not a legal document. You are not effacing that in any way, and it will help to guide the conversations. Once you get on page 29, you will just fill out the book. You name your personal health care agent, that person who you know will stand up for you, that person with whom you've discussed your wishes and got their buy-in on that. And then you choose what treatments you would or would not want. Would you want your life extended for as long as possible, by any means possible? Would you want medications and treatments that will make you comfortable, but not delay your death or extend it without quality of life when there is no further treatment to be done? Or would you want some of those treatments but not others? Those are the decisions that you make under the section medical treatments. And then finally, on page 34, I'm sorry, I've got this upside down and I can't read. I apologize. On page 36 is where you sign it and have 2 witnesses. You do not need an attorney to complete this document. You do not need to have your signature notarized. Now, of course, if you do have ready access to a notary, you certainly may do that. Just remember, you don't want to sign the document until you're in the presence of a notary. But if you choose not to have it notarized, you sign it and date it, and then you have it witnessed by two individuals. Your witnesses cannot be your agent, your witnesses cannot be your doctor, and your witnesses cannot be anyone who will benefit from your estate. So by and large, don't have any of your family members witness it. You can have friends, you can have neighbors, you can have coworkers, you can have perfect strangers witness their document because they're not looking at it and they're not being held accountable for whatever it says. Just have a couple of requests. Number one, please do not wait until you are hospitalized to fill out your advance directive. As everyone has said, in that crisis is not a good time to be making these decisions. Have that done as much as you can ahead of time. A more practical reason is that the witnessing requirements are very different if you execute this in a hospital setting, and it is not as easy to get your witnesses. So get it done beforehand. Talk about it with your family and loved ones. Make copies and give them to your agent and your family and your doctors. In the very back, there's a little card. Now, this is not a card for organ donation. It's not a card for anatomical gift for the body. But it does say, I have an advance directive, and this is the name of my agent. That's essential for the medical team to know, especially if your agent is not your next of kin. The other side says, this is where I keep my advance directive. I tell everyone that I've made out my advance directives 10 years ago, and my husband's and my directive are in the very same desk drawer, in the very same file, labeled advance directives as they have been for 10 years. Periodically, we'll have a discussion about advance directives, and I get the same thing from my husband. Where did you say those papers are kept? It is so easy to forget that detail, and yet so very essential in an emergency. So fill out the card, give the card to others, put one card behind your driver's license in your wallet so that if there is an emergency, the EMS will be able to find it. The copy is just as legal as the original. Please leave it in a safe place, but do not put it in your safety deposit box. It needs to be accessible, and we want it not to have to be delayed because nobody has the key to get into the deposit box. Doesn't need to be as secure as your financial will. Being accessible and having everyone know about it is so much more important. You can change your mind very easily. We all have circumstances that change, and we don't want to be tied into a long-term document if it doesn't represent our wishes. All you need to do is execute a new document. In the front of this book, you will see some numbers with the WellStar logo. If you go online, you can type in advanced directives, and it'll take you to the advanced directive page on our website. We have had the actual directive in a PDF format with a hyperlink. Unfortunately, our website is being retooled, and that link is no longer active, but hopefully it will come again. If there is something you'd like to know more about this, or you think, oh my gosh, I need to have my sister know about this, or my children, I have workshops that I hold each month. They're free of charge, and you can get the schedule of workshops by calling the other number here in the front. 956-STAR is our WellStar call center, and they can give you a list of workshops and where to sign up. And they're all over town. Have about 4 a year out here in East Cobb, so they really should be very convenient. Thank you very much.